morning, and thank you everyone for being here on time and prompt. It's 5 a.m. here. I've been up since 3:30, getting showered and straightening my hair. Didn't have my aircon on. It was 27 degrees, and I was thinking to myself, I feel really hot. Why is that? And so my hair is basically unstraightened again because I was so hot and sticky. But hey, there's some fun stories for you for this morning. This morning we are talking lettings. Loads and loads and loads of you talk to me all the time about how do I do this with a tenant? What do we do about this? What do we do about that? And in all honesty, I am actually not not the best person to ask about lettings, because I've got two lettings businesses. One is rent to rent, HMOs, serviced accommodation, contract accommodation, and one is standard lettings. But I do not do lettings because when I talk to tenants, they generally hand their notice in. I'm not the most patient of people when people ask stupid questions. So, and tenants, unfortunately, are not the brightest of all people I've ever encountered in business. And so I have lettings managers that do these things, and it's the lettings managers who are the qualified people. It's the lettings managers who run all the processes and the ops and all that sort of stuff. So what I really wanted to do for you, to be able to answer your lettings based questions, I wanted to bring someone in who is an expert at lettings. So, and what better way to do it than to do it from one of our own Cogito family. So Karen Southern has very kindly offered to do this session this morning. Just a little summary. Karen, I've been working with Karen since, when did I start working with Karen? Like April last year, Karen, was it?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, April.
I think it was April last year. And she's been in lettings for 14 years, so has seen lots of different parts of the lettings world, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which I know she's going to share with you this morning. At the moment, her letting agency runs around 50 managed properties, and we were just having a conversation around how many houses / tenant fines do we think she's done since she started, and it's over 400, but she doesn't know the exact number, but it's definitely over 400. So there's been, as you can imagine, there's a huge amount of knowledge, huge amount of experience there. Typically Karen does single let, buy to let type management. She doesn't really do HMO management. However, the rules around managing a tenant on an AST are the same whether that AST is in a HMO or whether the AST is in a single let. It's just it's room only ASTs rather than full house ASTs. The only thing that she probably can't answer questions about is the management of a community inside a shared house, because she doesn't really do that. But other than that, pretty much Karen's gonna be able to answer anything you throw at her. Now, I know that to prep for today, what she's done is go through all of the questions that you guys really kindly kind of prepped us to have, and she's just going to work through those questions. Now, if you have any additional questions as we go through today, what we need to do is just put them in the comments as they come up, and then Karen, once you've been through your existing list that you've already got, we can just work through those questions and get them all answered. So guys, if you could all give a massive welcome, obviously on comments, or just like a little round of applause on video, however you want to do it, to Karen. Karen, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for being here, and I will leave it over to you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you everyone for coming on a Saturday morning. So yeah, Sarah asked me if I'd do something on lettings, and it's quite difficult. I thought, oh gosh, how do you make lettings exciting and interesting? But I know there's a lot of legislation and a lot of stuff that's gone on. I mean, a bit of background about me. I started my agency about 14 years ago. And when I started it, there was very little legislation. You could do what you wanted. As a letting agent, you pretty much, which is why probably they've got a lot of bad press, but we could charge what we wanted. We could do what we wanted. There was hardly any rules and regs there. So things have changed a lot in the 14 years. I used to work for Royal Mail for a long time, and then I left there. And then I decided I wanted to do something in property. So that's how I came into it, because I'd sort of bought and sold houses through my life, and I wanted to do something property related. So my background is sort of sales and management development in within a huge corporate organisation. So I've run my own business for 14 years, so I am sort of unemployable now. I don't think I could go and work for anyone else again. And it's gone, yeah. And I feel that the key thing is relationships. I mean, that's how I built my business. It's relationships between the landlord and with the tenant, which comes back to this HMO thing that, you know, I don't manage HMOs, but I think the things are still the same. It's still about the relationships that you have and you build and how you work those with the people within your organisation. So I thought if I just go through the first bit, if I said to be a letting agent or to run as a letting agency type, what you need, because I know some people perhaps within the hub think, are thinking of doing that and actually, you know, taking over properties and working as a letting agent. So just the legal stuff you need, it's quite similar to sourcing really. You need PI insurance, you need property ombudsman membership, you need some sort of way of recording everything, some database, some CRM, because if you ever go to court for an eviction, you will have to provide everything. And some way of managing payments, so making sure that you can say exactly when money came in and when money went out. You'll need a deposit scheme that you use, whether it's one of the free schemes or whether it's one of the ones that you pay for and you keep the money yourself. And the key thing as a letting agent you need is client money protection. And client money protection is when you're holding on to other people's money. And that is fairly recent. It's just, I think it's coming from this year, but we've had ours for a while. But from the 1st of April, you must have client money protection. And just that is £500 a year. So if you start racking up what a letting agent needs, the portals are, I mean, Rightmove, you'll be paying £500–600 to get that portal. Zoopla and On the Market are slightly cheaper. So it's just things to think about if you're thinking of going and setting up yourself as a letting agent. Oh, excuse me. That they're the sorts of costs and the things you need. The client money protection, you have to have all those other things for them to sign you off, plus a letter from the bank to prove that you are, that all your client money is safe. So that just gives you an idea. So when people say, oh, I don't know what letting agents, you know, why do we pay them what they pay? You've got to remember that is just the costs, the paper costs of just opening up a letting agency. And then you've got all your other costs as well. So, but it can be done. And there's plenty of ways of, you know, of doing it. And I'm happy if anyone after this wants to talk to me about, you know, anything to do with it, obviously just get in touch with me. That's fine. So that just gives you an idea. I thought if I work through the questions, because the questions are really good, I thought, well, what am I going to talk about? How to make it exciting? How to make it interesting? And when I got the questions in, I thought, oh, these are brilliant, because they pretty much cover all the stuff I would have done had I sat there and done some slides and gone through and made a sort of, I don't know, I don't want it all to be about me. So hopefully, if I go through the questions, it'll cover off a lot of things that people have perhaps have got in their minds. And also, if there's anything else, then we can go through that at the end. So I've written them all down here. I've got the first ones. If I go through, I think the key thing to do is when you're setting up a tenancy, it's like buying a property. When you buy a property, you have to buy it at the right price, because if you're not buying it right, then you set yourself up to fail. So similarly with lettings, you set it up at the start. You get the right tenant and then it all works out, and the right landlord and everything else. So a lot of these will come back to actually making that, getting it right at the start, making sure that you do everything that you possibly can to get the right person into that property and to give them the property in the right state for them to carry on with it. So that to me is, if there's one tip, I would say, if you want an easier life, get it right at the start, because if you don't get it right in the start, it will just cause you no end of problems as things go on. So I've got, if I go through Claire's questions, Claire said about needy tenants. So needy tenants is quite an interesting one. I know that she sort of put around, we can't do maintenance, can't do their own maintenance, they're on the phone all the time. And I think it comes down to making sure it's about gauging that at the start. It goes to the usual 80-20 rule. So 80% of your tenants you'll never hear from, but 20% you'll hear from every few minutes. And I've got a thing on my phone. I see that these people ringing me. I think, oh, what are they going to say this time? And it's always the same people, and they'll always be moaning, or they'll be asking questions, or strange, silly things. And I think it comes down to, with needy tenants, i.e. people that can't do anything, you've got to push it back to them. They've got to be able to, I mean, you can't change light bulbs, you just cannot do it. I mean, if it's your own property, if you want to keep going around them and doing it, then that's your call. But as an agent, I can't keep going around and sending people around every time that there's a silly, you know, something like a light bulb or a door that's a bit loose or something like that. So what you need to do is manage their expectations from the start. Have somebody that can go out and do little jobs. It doesn't cost very much money. So have maybe someone who's sort of semi-retired or something like that, who can actually go down and just do what I consider to be little jobs that anyone could do, but also batting stuff back to them. So if they phone up, and I think it's a key thing, is when you get your tenants phoning in and they say, oh, this isn't working, it's asking all those questions and you get down to what is the actual problem. Certainly I had an apprentice and I took him on, and he used to take the calls and he'd say, oh, the tap's not working. Well, which tap? What's it not doing? You know, is it the hot water? Is it the cold water? Is it the bathroom? Is it the is it the bathroom? Is it the kitchen? So it's making sure you understand exactly what, and then sometimes you can actually talk them through how to do things themselves, because it's a useful thing for people to learn to do simple things themselves. But obviously, you know, if you've got strange light bulbs, then you have to sometimes show them how to get, some of the halogen ones are quite strange. It is worth sort of showing them how to do it and then taking it on from there. So I think you've got to be strong, because if you go around there all the time and you just pander to their requests, it's, you know, it won't work and it'll just cause all sorts of problems. So, I mean, when the boiler goes down, it's, well, what's happening to it? What's it not doing? What lights are on? Have you reset it? It's making sure you're questioning so that you can actually limit the amount of time you spend actually dealing with the problem. So I hope that helps on that, and just, but yeah, do not go down the route where they think they can just be on your beck and call. And at the end of the day, even if it's your property, they are your tenants. They're not your mates. They're not your friends. So you know, it is a business relationship, and make sure you keep it in that way, because I think you can cause all sorts of, you know, it will just become a problem if you actually allow it to, you know, allow people to think that you're just there every time, all the time. And it also comes down to this day and night thing. I don't answer, although I've got a 24-hour emergency call line, I don't answer it if it's outside office hours, because it has a messaging service, and therefore if there's a problem, if they've got water pouring through their sink, they will leave a message or they will text. But I'm not going to just pick it up and start something where you have people, because they've finished work and they've come home and their door handle's fallen off. Well, you know, that can wait till the morning. So be strong and, you know, and treat it as a business, and don't allow it, because otherwise you will have them calling you 24/7. You know, you'd be on a Sunday, you'll be sitting there, because they're at home, they'll be ringing you and oh, this has gone wrong, this has gone wrong. And you've got to remember that tenants, because they are, they will try and get things done when they're at home, which is obviously outside working hours for most people. So just be strong, and, you know, it's hard to say, but you do need to do it from day one. Leading on for that, I know that Claire has put about cleanliness and garden maintenance. So cleanliness is a hard thing, and pretty much when you go to people's houses to do inspections and they know you're coming, and you look and you think, oh my God, how do they live like this? They knew I was coming. How, you know, this is the way they live. And I've learned that I am obviously quite tidy, which I didn't realise that I am as tidy as I am. But I do think you can't impose your cleanliness upon other people. You can't sort of, if they leave their washing up in the sink and they don't clean it, you can't actually suggest that they do those things. But you can, if the oven, I always think all the things that really matter, the things that are going to make devalue your property, are the things you can pick up on. So your oven is a key. You know, if they're really trashing the oven, the likelihood is you're not going to get it cleaned up at the end. So they need to understand that they need to have the oven cleaned, and they need to make sure that they are doing it. But if they're not hoovering, if they're not, you know, putting stuff away, it really is hard, and it's hard to see it in your own property. But it's not something you can do. And I always sort of now think, if I got a van and took all their stuff out of this place, what would the place be like then? Would it just be a case of cleaning it, or have they actually trashed it? So have they smeared stuff all over the walls? And then that's when you would need to deal with it and make sure that you are on top of it. But for a general cleanliness, you've got to almost shut your eyes and think, okay, yeah, they're messy, they're untidy, but at the end of the day, they'll have to clear it up. And I think going back to the start of a tenancy, so what we do is when we move tenants in, and I would recommend that anyone does it properly. You move a tenant in and you actually give them an inventory which is done by an independent person, or you could do it yourself, but it's better if it's done by an independent company, and it shows the condition of everything when they move in. So the ones that we use, we pay about 60 quid for them, and they have pictures of everything. So they're sort of, I could never be an inventory clerk because it's just not me. I'm not a detail person, but it shows everything. So they know when they move in, this is what it looks like. And this is actually, this is how it was. And the inventory guys are not going to they don't care. They don't care. If the place is dirty, they'll write it's dirty. They're not going to try and help anyone out. So it's a totally independent report. And then obviously that becomes the state of the place when they move in. As an agent, we use the same inventory guys to go and do the interim checks. So we do checks. At the moment, we're still doing checks because I'm using independent inventory clerks, so I'm not having to go in. But yeah, we do check at 3 months. We do 3 months, probably up to a year. And then after that, it drops into 6 months. And then sometimes it will drop to, I've got tenants that have been in my properties for 10 years. So, we only do yearly inspections in them because they're hardly going to trash it after that time. So I think it's really important, and that's the way you can address these cleaning issues, because they will write down that the ovens, they will go in the oven, they will go everywhere, and they will take pictures of the bath and down the toilet, and it's a perfect way. And then you can actually pick that up with the tenant, because you can send them a copy of the report, and then obviously a copy of that report will go to the landlord if you're managing. And you can address those situations there. And it's just giving things like the shower screens, have you seen this product that's really good for spraying on your shower screen? Because we've got hard water down here, so we get really white, on the shower screens. So it's just helping them and advising them of things that they could do that will make things better, and hopefully they will listen and get it done. But picking it up as you go, because if you're picking it up after 3 months, if it's minging at 3 months, what's it going to be like at 6 months, 12 months? You've got to keep on top of it. And it's the easiest way to do it is to actually make sure you do regular inspection, even in your own properties. Just make sure you do them. If you don't want to do them, pay someone to do them. Our interims about £30 each. So if you don't want to go around and look around your tenants and look in your cupboards and everything else, then just get an inventory clerk to do it. And then obviously also, I think for your insurance as well, I think there's something in landlord insurance that if you're not inspecting your properties, you could get unstuck. So I hope that helps. And the garden is the same thing, because obviously the inventory picks up the garden at the start, and then when they move out, it's the garden at the end. So if the picture of the garden looks like this and then it looks like this, well, clearly it's changed. And so there is no debate. That's the answer. So if you're doing the interims, you're picking up, they're not cutting the grass. They're not doing this, they're not doing that. So you would pick up, you need to make sure the grass is cut. If not, you offer to get somebody in to do it. We can get a gardener in, it'll cost you X if you don't want to do it yourself. So it's picking it up, making sure you're on top of it, and actually, dealing with it, I suppose, as you go. But I would say that with gardens, if someone's got a wonderful garden, as much as a tenant will tell you, oh, we love gardening, we're always out there doing the garden. They're not. Most people are not out in their gardens, and they're not as interested as they suddenly are when they suddenly get the garden until they have to do it. So if you've got a really lovely garden, then you're better off to pay to have a gardener in and factor that in the rent to make sure that that gets, you know, that it stays not like a nice garden, rather than gets trashed. Because obviously if they don't do hedges and things, if they get out of control and they're there for 6 years or them, you'll end up with hedges that you can't get back to shape. So you just need to be on top of it and make sure that you're paying to, you know, getting somebody in to do it if it's not a case, because it'd be cheaper to do that. Let me have a look at these questions and see what I've
Cameron, sorry, it's Emma here. There are some questions on the chat. Is that you cool? That's all right then.
I've just looked at them. So yeah,
I'll leave it then.
The strangest request I've had with the tenant. Oh God, I've had some stupid things. I might have to come back to that, Dan. Really silly things, you know, crazy things. But I'll think about that. I might have to come back to that. A messaging service. Well, basically the messaging service is we've just got an office phone that everyone reports everyone rings to. So I know that when that phone rings, that is the letting service. And then they leave the voicemail and say, oh, I've got water coming through my ceiling. Or generally, oh, my washing machine isn't working. So you then can pick the call up. You see if it's worth the answer, as in, is my washing machine not working a major disaster, which clearly it isn't, although it does appear that in some ways. Often tenants believe that their washing machine not working is an emergency. But if you pick it up from the messaging service, you can either then just send them a text, got your message, we'll deal with it Monday. Obviously, water coming through the ceiling, then you would need to get onto it and sort that out on the night. But it's just managing the calls, because, you know, they will just ring you. And if you pick it up, you'll start ending up just having your life totally ruled by tenants, actually, just because they're I think we're at home. I think we'll report the washing machine now rather than waiting until office hours. So it's just a tip from someone who's been in it a while, to actually make sure you manage those. How do you go on about setting a rental price if you're advertising a property and they want it set at a price that's too expensive? Oh, that's a good one. Rachel, yeah. Rental prices, landlords will say, oh, I think it's worth this. And you might say, well, I don't know if it's worth that. It's you need to manage their expectations. So we can get, because we have portals, we can get all the background stuff that people can't see. So for example, on Rightmove, you can run a report for all the properties that have been let within the last 3 years or 2 years or 6 months or whatever. And you can actually show them as an example to the landlord. So you can get, that's how agents value properties for sale. It's how we value properties for let. And you give comparables and you present that to the landlord. So we would generally go out with that. So we would, if I was going to a property, I'd have a rough idea about what it's worth within a boundary. If the landlord then says, oh, but I think it's worth this, and you clearly think it isn't, I always say, well, I'll advertise it for wherever you want. But it may mean that if you're not going to get the inquiries that you possibly would, or you're not going to get the right tenants. So therefore, it's about sort of telling them your knowledge. So you tell them it's worth £800, they tell you it's worth 1,000. We'll advertise it for 1,000, but keep an eye on it. So if after, which clearly probably will happen, if after 2 or 3 days you've got no inquiries, well, clearly the price is wrong. So they either hold out for the extra £200 and, you know, lose loads of rent, or they go to the correct price and actually, you know, and get their property let. So you have to take instructions from the landlord. You can advise, but if they want it advertised at a certain price, it goes on as that, as long as, in my opinion, as long as I've told them that I don't think it's worth that, then if that's what they want to advertise for, and if they get it, then I suppose good on them, I suppose. But and at the moment you can do that, because I don't know if it's the same. I think it's the same everywhere, but you could name your price at the moment on any property and you'll probably get it, because it's so desperate. But are those people going to stay there when everything dies down? They'll go and find something better and you'll end up with more costs. So I think it's about managing expectations and basing it upon, because you can get comparables even if you're not on right, you know, you're not actually got a portal. So what's this? This is from Sushi. I've got an independent inventory company, impartial, comprehensive and fit for purpose. Perfect. I mean, yeah, I've never lost, this is a bit of a claim to fame, I've never lost a deposit claim in my life. In my whole career, I've won every deposit claim, which is a bit of a, unheard of, because I make sure that when people move in, that they've got, we've had the independent inventory company, and when they move out, we do the same. And I've got the evidence to back it up. So I've never lost a deposit claim. So totally, the inventory companies are worth their weight in gold. They're brilliant. So yeah, so there we are. For sushi, I don't know where you are, but obviously a really good tip is definitely use them for the cost of it, because you can put it against the business and it's definitely worth it. And what they produce is really high quality, as opposed to me going out and spending hours standing in a property, with my tick list. So, but some people, if you're a detail person, you might want to do your own. Would you still pay for HMOs? Would the inventory cover the communal spaces and their room? I think with the inventory on an HMO, you could do it. I think you'd probably do your own inventory on a room, because it would probably not be cost effective. But with my HMOs, I would be making sure you're going in there and checking the communal areas, because you can actually go in and do that. So I think I've got people that I use it for HMOs, because I don't manage any, but they go in and they have cleaners going in, so they'd be checking. And then obviously you would have you would be going and checking the fire alarms and everything like that. So I think I'd do my own inventory for an HMO, but I'd make sure it's really detailed and just have all the pictures. Sushi, it's nodding, is that right? Yeah, because I think it wouldn't be cost effective to send someone in just to do a room, would it? And you can't base one person on, 6 people's, what people are doing in the communal areas, because you can't pin that down to one person. So you'd have to just do, the communal areas would have to just be managed by, you checking them regularly. Do my inventory clerks work in Kent, or can I recommend any company? The one obviously I use are in Kent, because I'm down in Dover, but there are some national companies that you can use. But I would put the word out on your local Facebook groups, or go ask your letting agents and find out who they use, and go to them. There are some national companies that I don't think there's anyone that actually covers the whole country. They'll be like franchised out and that sort of thing. But yeah, just find a good company, get an example of their report, see what they do, see what they offer, get their price list, and then that'll help you, and just make sure it's really detailed. All of ours are signed online, so everything's just kept online, so it's perfect. But they are worth their weight in gold. Listen. What have I got here? If you self-manage, what happens if a tenant arranges their own tradesman to fix something without telling you there was ever a problem and expects you to pay for it? Jodie, yeah. If a tenant arranges their own tradesman to fix something and expects you to pay for it, well, then you don't, because they should never have asked. They should never have arranged it. The only way you can do that is if it goes really down the line. So a tenant, if say the boiler broke and you did nothing about it, and they've got a trail to prove that you or the agent did nothing about it, and they then get their own tradesperson in to do it, they could have a claim, and you might have to pay. But if they've just decided to get someone to fix something, then they've got it should be within their tenancy agreement, and they've got no grounds to actually ask for you to pay for it, because you need to be given the opportunity first to fix the problem. So yeah, it's about this relationship thing. It's making sure that tenants know that they need to call you if there's a problem, or they need to run stuff past you. They can't just decorate, they can't just change light. I've seen that before, change light fittings, and then the light fitting, and they've actually played around with the wiring. Well, they're not allowed to do it. Say you're not allowed to do it. But I always say to my tenants, if you want something, just ask, and we'll look at it and we'll run it past the landlord. Because if it's a reasonable request, why wouldn't we let them do? Why wouldn't we let them paint? Or in my opinion, I know some of my landlords get a bit funny about it, but it depends how long they've been there as well. If they've only been there 6 months, you don't want them painting the house. But if they've been there several years, if they want to sort of do their own decoration and stuff, then I personally think, as long as I think they're up to it, that it's a good thing because they're making it their home, if that's what you want, that they stay there for a long time. But they must run it past you, and they must run the colours past you as well. What's this, Julie? Prices dropping in South London, definitely a renter's market here at the moment. Yeah, I've heard that. My friend's son, he's just gone and got a property in London, and yeah, they are down here. Prices are going crazy because we just haven't got enough property. So it's a bit of an anomaly, isn't it, really? Okay, so that's covered those questions off. Hopefully I'm not just rambling and going off on a tangent and whatever. Yeah, so I've done Claire's questions. Hopefully, Claire, that's answered those. And the goodwill and rent increases. Rent increases is an interesting one because at the moment, you've got to say, unless there's a real reason to put up your rent and you know your tenants can afford it, should you be increasing rents just because rents are going up everywhere? It's an interesting one. You can only increase rents once a year. Once in a 12-month period, and you have to do it there's a formal form now that you have to use. So I think on an annual basis, you should be reviewing your rents. Whether you put them up or not is another question. Personally, I've got properties of my own, and we haven't put up the rents for a number of years because my tenants are superb, they're lovely, and I don't think they can really afford that much more, so therefore I've left them because I'm happy, because they just pay their rent every month, they look after my property, and they're as good as gold and I won't lose them. But from a letting agent perspective, I have to have a different view, and I have to sort of review the rents. We do it every year, see if they're near market value, look at the tenants and think, right, will they, can they afford more money? And also, if we put the rent up, will we lose them? And if that's going to be the case, sometimes putting the rent up is a bonus, because yes, you might want to lose them because they are a pain in the ass. But most of the time, you'd be thinking, well, if you put it up to market rent, then they can go around and look at other properties at market rent and think, oh, I'll take that one, I'll move. And then you could have the cost of reletting and redecorating and all the things that come with that. So I think it is a good way of, if you've got annoying tenants. We've got one at the moment, because you've got a lot of properties at the moment where people are getting on each other's nerves, as everyone is, because they're all stuck in lockdown, and they've got them exercising upstairs, and tenants moaning that people are jumping around above in their rooms, and we've got neighbour disputes. We've got loads of stuff going on at the moment. It's very easy, if you've got tenants, for people to complain about them. Because if you've got to go and approach your neighbour because you own your house and they own their house, people don't do it. But if they've got tenants, they'll phone the agent and say, oh, your tenants are paying, they're doing this. Well, have you spoken to them? Well, no. Well, do you not think it's going to be worse if I go and speak to them? But anyway, we've got a lot of this going on, and one of the tenants is very annoying, and she is jumping around and she is causing a lot of problems. So we are going to put her rent up, because ultimately, hopefully, she might decide to move on if that's the case. So it is a sort of she might not, because she could afford it, she might just think, oh, I'll stay and carry on annoying everyone. But yeah, I think rent reviews, definitely, you should review it every year and then just look at it on a case-by-case basis and see, which ones are worth going up and which ones aren't. So hopefully that's covered that one off. Jackie said about pets. There's a big thing at the moment about pets, because they're saying that the government are trying to bring it in so that people have a right to have a pet, as opposed to, you've got to think of a reason why you can't have a pet, rather than say, no straight off. So with new properties now, we're saying to landlords, you do realise that we may have to take a pet. If the tenants decide, they say we want a dog, there may not be a reason why we can say no. At the moment, it's not a rule, but it's coming through, and they're saying that it potentially is going to happen. My view on pets is, if a property looks as though it's suitable for a pet, then it's something that I would think, right, okay, I might consider a tenant with a pet. But we look at it on a case-by-case basis. So, and that's how I always look at it with tenants. They say, would you accept a pet? And I say, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. So basically, if somebody's got 3 kids, 2 dogs, a hamster, a bearded dragon, everything else, then possibly not. But if you've got a couple with a dog, one of them's at home, you've got to look at it on a case-by-case basis. In a flat, my opinion on dogs and things in flats, if it's in the head lease, you can't allow them anyway. But you've also got to think of the neighbours and people walking pets through the communal areas. So, you know, that again is something to consider. You can't take extra bonds now for pets. We used to have a thing where we used to say, yeah, you can have a pet, you're going to pay another £500 on your deposit. Can't do that now because all deposits are capped at 5 weeks rent. So you cannot take any more than 5 weeks rent deposit. The thing you can do is you can take an extra rent. So I've got a property where the tenant said, could we have a dog? So I did an extra £25 to their rent. They, you know, I said, well, they said we'll pay an extra deposit. I said, well, you can't pay an extra deposit. So you've got to, you know, the only way we do it, I think the landlord may allow it if you pay it an extra rent, and they agreed and they're paying extra rent for it. So you can actually do it like that. But I think realism, I've got some of my best tenants have got pets because they haven't been allowed to live anywhere else because people won't accept them. So I think it really is, look at the case. If you've got 2 adults, they're both at work from 8 till 7 and they've got a dog, well, what's happening to that dog whilst they're at work? You know, who's looking after it? If it's going to some daycare or something, then that's fine. But if it's just sitting in the house howling and, you know, not being able to go out, then that's not, again, that's not a suitable thing. And similarly, if you've got a load of kids and a load of pets, you know, the wear and tear on the property is massive. So, you know, but are pets worse than kids? There's a, you know, who knows? You know, you could say 3 kids is worse than having a dog, definitely. So I think you've really got to look at it on a case-by-case basis and just be honest with them. You know, if you don't want a pet in there, you've got to really have a really good reason, in my opinion, to do it. But then if they've got 2 or 3, then no, you know, that's too many. But and when they come to you and ask, can we have a pet? Again, it's look at it. Well, what's happening to it? What's happening? And then they, you know, make them tell you what's gonna, you know, what they're going to do with it in the day when they're at work, so that you know that your house isn't going to be trashed. So hopefully that covers the pet bit. Selling houses, even if the landlord never lived in it, difficult one at the moment, because notice, and I have got another question about notice. Notice at the moment is 6 months. Whatever it is, it's 6 months. Unless you've got some extreme circumstances, which the courts, because under COVID, it used to be 1 month for the 2 months for the landlord, 1 month for the tenant. It now is 6 months for the landlord, 1 month for the tenant. So the tenant can clear off within a month, and that's perfectly fine. But at the moment, it's 6 months for a landlord. So you need to look at each, if you're thinking of serving notice, you need to think, well, what's the chance of getting these people out? Because obviously once you serve notice on them, they sometimes might not pay their rent, and you've got this 6 months. We don't know if it's going to reduce. There's talk that it's going to stay at 6 months, which is pretty dire, really. But the only ways that you'll be able to reduce that and serve like a Section 8 is if you've got antisocial behaviour, which is quite extreme. It's not just people annoying the neighbours, it's extreme proper antisocial behaviour, so the police are involved. 6 months rent arrears, which is, you know, pretty dire straits, really. If they breach right to rent procedures, and right to rent is about checking that people are allowed to live in this country. So basically, you take, it's one of the other checks that you take when people move into a property. You have to physically see their identification, their passport, or a qualifying identification. So if they breach that, then I mean that would be quite difficult to do. I think you kind of really check them out properly. But yeah, if they breach that, that's another reason to get them out. And fraud, if they've had the tenant taking on the tenancy and it's been proven there was a fraudulent case. So they're the only real reasons that you can get your property back with less than 6 months at the moment. So it is quite extreme. What we have done is that obviously you serve your 6 months notice. Sometimes some tenants might be you might be able to assist them to leave by offering them the money for their next deposit, or if you really want people to go, you know, it's about relationships again. It's talking to them and trying to sort of help and assist them to go. It's not a bribe, but it sort of is, I suppose. But you're actually, you know, saying, well, if we were able to give you this amount of money. We did it with one of our tenants. The landlord had sold his property this last June, sold the property. She can't find anywhere to go to. So we've offered her £3,000, almost 6 months rent, so that she can go and offer 6 months rent to go and move somewhere else. It's worth it to the landlord because they might lose the sale on the property, and it's a very expensive property. But yeah, it's managing those relationships and thinking through the situation at the moment, because you can't just get rid of people. You are down to this 6 months, and that's, you know, something we're all having to deal with at the moment. So if somebody isn't paying their rent, we've got payment programs in place with them. We're trying to work through, help them. You know, if you can, you know, look after them for now whilst they're in this, you know, the position they're in, because a lot of people have lost their jobs and haven't got a lot of money. So if you could actually look after them now, if they've always been good tenants, then really, you know, if you can help them through this situation, then that's the best way. But if you want to sell, which is I think what Jackie was saying, if the landlord's, I don't think it doesn't really matter even if the landlord never lived in it, but if you want to sell the property, it's a difficult one. You're probably better off to get them out before you put it on the market, because otherwise they'll never be able to exchange on it all the time it hasn't got vacant possession. So anyone looking to sell at the moment, unless they're selling it with the tenant in situ, it's a really hard one because of the current situation with COVID. So I hope that helps. It's a bit doom and gloom really, but yeah. But things will sell with the tenant in, but then you've also got this thing where people are nervous about buying stuff with tenants in because they don't know if they're paying their rent, and they know they can't get them out if they're not. So it's a really difficult one at the moment. But I think work with the tenants. You know, if you want to sell the house, it might be worth offering them something to go, or helping them find somewhere else, which, you know, I think is the best way forward. So it's something, I mean, I've got a tenant recently who's just been investigated for fraud, and the landlord says, I want him out. And I said, well, we can't, he's not being investigated. He's been a tenant of ours for 6 years. So I said, we can't, you know, let's work with him and try and sort it out. And hopefully if they reduce it, we might be able to go in when they reduce it back to the 2 months, hopefully. But at the moment, we'd have to give him 6 months notice to get out. So, because he's still paying his rent. So hopefully that covers that one. What else have I got? So one thing you can do, and it's really interesting about if you've ever lived in a property and you're putting it out for sale, putting it out for rent, there is a clause, a section 1 clause. If you put that into the tenancy agreement, that will give you the grounds to get that property back. And with they're saying now with the long-term tenancies, all the things the government are trying to bring in, it's definitely worth thinking about putting that in any properties that you've ever lived in yourself, or you could sort of use that your family have lived in, or that you might want to move into yourself. If you put a section 1 clause in there, and you'll be able to find that online. If you put a section 1 clause in there, it'll help you get that back. And I'm making sure that now any properties that we're renting out, that where someone has lived in it, we're putting the section 1 clause in, just to make sure that we can, it just gives us more chance to get it back. So it's just a tip there, really. Oh yes, Jackie said also about ASTs, which one to use to cover all eventualities. What I would strongly advise anyone is just to be a member of the RNLA or a similar body, so that because you can get all of the paperwork, you can get all of the advice. They've got an advice line. I don't get paid to say this, but they've got an advice line that you can use. We use them. We can run anything past them, and they have all the tenancy agreements. Whether you want a rent increase document, Section 8, any forms are all on there, and you just type into them, set them all up for yourself. So with ASTs, which is your assured short hold tenancy agreement, which is the agreement that you would use for any tenancy unless it was a company agreement. you really, there should only be one. You should only have one AST. We only use one AST, and we just adapt it to suit the situation. So you can put in your own clauses. You can add your own clauses if you want to, but what you need to remember is they need to be fair. You can't just chuck a clause in, you know, tenants can't put the telly on after 8 in the evening. I mean, that's an unfair clause. So as long as it's a fair clause, then you can put it in. So it could be something like, if they were in a flat, then they're not allowed to hang washing over the balconies, because obviously that's in the head lease. So you could actually put that in as your clause, because it's not unfair, because it's part of the head lease, saying that you're not allowed to hang, you know, washing over the balconies. So any clauses that you add yourself, just make sure they're really clear, they're really basic. They don't need to be all jargonized or legal speak. Just make them very clear and just make sure they're fair. So, because if they're not fair and they're not just, then they'll get kicked out in court anyway. So it's pointless. So just make, but we have things where landlords have, I'm just trying to think of sort of things. Oh, we've got one where they've got a bamboo tree in the garden, and the bamboo has to be cut down every year. So it's a clause in there to say that they must allow someone to come in and do the bamboo tree once a year. It's just, you know, it's a simple thing, but it makes it, you know, if then they didn't allow it, it could cause damage to the property. So yes, you can add your own clauses in. You can add as many as you want, but they just need to be sensible and fair. They can't, you know, be silly or unjust. Negotiating damage. So this goes back to having an inventory when you move in and a checkout when you move out. So when you have those things, you will see that this was there then and it's not there now. So it's very simple. There's no hole in the carpet when you moved in, and there's a big, you know, hole in the carpet now. So that's how you negotiate it. And you basically, you need to, now it's very, very hard to actually get costs out of tenants. So if it's going to cost you 60 quid to clean the oven, then you can charge 60 quid for the oven if it's not been brought back to the same standard that it was, but you have to spend that money. So you can't just take money off a tenant and then not spend it. You can't say, oh, well, they broke the handle off the, you know, off the kitchen cupboard and I'm going to charge them 60 quid, but then you don't spend the 60 quid. You've got to spend. So basically whatever you charge them, you need to spend it. So you can't make money out of damage. You can't, and you can't get betterment. So if the carpet is stained, but the carpet's 10 years old, well, it really needs replacing anyway. So you'll never get, as a deposit claim, you'll never get the money back for really old carpets and things like that, because you might get 20 quid or something towards a new one, but you'll never get the whole amount. So it's about being fair and negotiating. And I think, again, you know, if anyone wants help with that sort of thing, you know, put stuff to us and we can certainly help with it, because it is something that comes through. It's not worth, I mean, landlords, when tenants move out, they will say, oh, but they've done this. And you think, yeah, but they've been there for 6 years and they've got a whole, you know, family of 2 adults, 2 children. It's not going to be the same as when they moved in. You've got to allow for fair wear and tear. So it's just about being reasonable, really. And it's the only time when if I ever fall out with tenants, I fall out with them when they move out, because we try to claim money from their deposit and they dispute it. And it's always the same. And the nicest of tenants become my, you know, hate me because I'm trying to claim some money from them for the deposit. So it's but if I've got the evidence, then, as I said, I've never lost a claim. So it's just making sure you tie everything up and make sure that, because if you're going to claim for damage, you've got to make sure that it is damage. And it's, you know, it's not something that where it's just substandard or it's wear and tear. So hopefully that one covers that. Have I got any more? So where can you get a rent increase template? You can get them from the NRLA. So, and there's a lot of stuff now on the government website, because they've got a lot of paperwork. So I don't know if that's on there, but I get all my stuff from the National Residential Landlords Association. It's about, I think it's £75 a year to be a member. it's just worth its weight in gold, because you've only got to have one issue where you need some legal advice, and you ring them up and they'll give you that. So it's worth, you know, and you can get all your tenancy agreements from there. I think you can get inventory reports if you want to do your own. So yeah, get them from there, and all the documents are on there, which is really good. I've had a tenant who's been in the house for over 4 years. What's the best way to add the Section 1 clause? Is that property I was living in and she's built up rent arrears? The only way you'd be able to add a Section 1 clause to that is by issuing a new tenancy agreement, which you won't really want to do if they've been in there for 4 years. So I don't think you'd be able to put that in unless you want to put them on a new tenancy agreement. And if they've built up rent arrears, it's a bit late, unless you give them a clean slate. So probably need to talk. I mean, if you want to message me about that one, I could talk about that one. But yeah, somebody's asked that they've got a tenant that's already built up rent arrears and they haven't put the Section 1 clause in. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to just stick that in there because you won't be able to change their tenancy agreement. Yeah, the NRALA is very helpful, Julie, and they're very supportive. It's just worth its weight in money. I think anyone who is a member can give anyone who isn't a member like a referral link, and they can get it for 60 quid. So if anyone wants a link, then I could probably get that for them if you want to join up, because it's yeah, get it for 25, what's that, 60s? Anyway, get some money off it anyway, which is really good. But it's definitely worth its weight in gold. Anyone who's got any property, any landlords, just join it. You can do training, you can do all sorts of things with them, and you know, it's just for the money it costs. It's worth it, and we've got it as in we're agents. So, oh, there we are. Oh yeah, Gillian is the Welsh rep now. So if you need any info, drop her a DM. Yeah, so Gillian was one of the Cogito members. So yeah, and she's obviously the rep for the Welsh area, which is really good. And they do run really useful. I always go to them. I must be particularly sad, but useful like events in your area, and you meet up and you can meet loads of local landlords. It can be quite amusing, really. But yeah, loads of local landlords, and they have the local council there. They have people from different organisations there, and they run through all the latest legislation and all the latest things that are going on in your area. So if you join up with them, you can definitely go to you know, go to those events, because they're worth it, and you can get to network as well. And you're some of the big landlords are there, so you never know. There might be some, you know, possible opportunities as well. So definitely worth, you know, exploring that once we're allowed to leave and go out again. There's no AST in Scotland as their national. I think they do, Derek. So Derek's asking, are there any? There's no ASTs in Scotland. They've got different type of tenancies. They have those agreements. They've certainly got, I've seen, yes, because when you go in, you choose which country's agreements you want. So there's Welsh in there I've seen. So definitely there must be some, I'd imagine there's got, you could check that before you actually joined up. But they must support the whole country. I've definitely seen the different types of tenancy agreements on there. So yeah, Derek, I would imagine that they would be able to do that for you. So, but check that before you join up. But I'm sure because they're national, I'm sure they would have the whole country. Right, a couple more. Yes, hi, you can DM me and I can talk about that. That'll be fine. So Dan said, there is a big thing around at the moment about, and I think I've got this right, about annual letting agent contracts. So they're saying that because when you sign up with a letting agent, you sign a contract that ties you in for a year, and they're suggesting that people are trying to lobby to get that reduced. So my opinion on that as a letting agent is a year, really. If I find someone the best tenant, which I like to think I do, then if they were able to leave after 6 months instead of a year, that, you know, manage their own property, they're taking the benefit obviously of the tenant that I've got them, and it just wouldn't be worth it, because at the start I explained how much money it costs us just to open our doors to actually have all the stuff that we have to have. So yeah, I think that it's something that they're talking about. But to be quite honest, if people want to self-manage, I try and encourage them to self-manage from the start. because why would they let me manage it for 6 months and then try and do it themselves? They might as well just do it from day one. And I've got a lot of landlords that are tenant find only. And to be quite honest, they come back to me and they'll say, oh, we've got a problem with this. And I advise them and help them, because at the end of the day, I want to stay in with them, because when the tenant leaves, they will, you know, obviously come back to me and get me to find them the next tenant. So I would, if we were looking at having shorter than annual contracts, I probably would try and not take on properties if I thought I was going to lose them after 6 months, because we wouldn't make any money out of that, because obviously our charges, if we're managing, are a lot less than, because if we do a tenant find service, we charge one big fee for finding the tenant. If we then do the, you know, full management, then we charge a monthly fee and a smaller upfront fee. So we'd have to make it worth our while to actually, you know, manage it. Otherwise it's just not worth it, because it is really, I know that everyone moans about letting agents, but it is actually quite expensive to actually do it, you know, to find a tenant for somebody. The viewings, just, you know, the time, especially at the moment where you're putting a property on and you're getting 60 inquiries. I mean, how are we managing that? It's really, really hard, and trying to, you know, break that down to get the best people out of 60. So yeah, it's about, I think it's something that people are moaning about, and I think it's about tying people into dodgy agents. If you're, you know, if you're not giving the service, then, you know, you should let your landlords go. You know, I have only ever lost one landlord recently, and that's a COVID issue because of an eviction. But yeah, if somebody really didn't want to work with me, then I would be happy for them to go, and I would just let them go, whether they're in the year or not, because why would we carry on the relationship if it's not good for either of us? So and similarly, I have let landlords go because they're just, if they won't spend the money and they won't look after the property and they won't do the maintenance, and I don't want to work with them, because why would I have tenants that are unhappy? It's about the relationship between the three of us. And I think that's really key, is making sure you've got a relationship with your tenant, with your landlord, you know, as a letting agent, and having that three-way relationship, because it's not always the tenant that's the bad thing. It sometimes can be the landlord being unreasonable. So yeah, I think this annual letting agency, I think we'll have to just see how that pans out there. I think hopefully I've answered that. And yeah, and Dan said about gardens, stating expectations. If it's a, as I said, if it's a garden, also another thing, I saw something yesterday on a site, and someone said, they were talking about whether you leave white goods in properties and stuff. And this guy said, I always take down the shed. And I thought, why would you take down the shed? And obviously, if there's a massive garden and the tenants may not have a, you know, if there's a massive garden and there's no shed, where are they going to put a lawnmower? So therefore, if there's nowhere for them to put a lawnmower, the last thing you want is the lawnmower in the lounge. So therefore, you need to think about, you know, if you want the tenants to cut the grass, then they need to put a lawnmower somewhere. So they'll need a shed, or they'll need somewhere to put it. So I think it's all those things to think about when you're moving people in. And when this guy said we take sheds down, I thought, why would you do that? You know, why would you not leave them with the shed? So, but yeah, it's making sure that if you expect people to maintain the garden and they've got nowhere to keep any stuff to maintain the garden, then you're sort of setting up to fail, really. So with gardens, yeah, it's keeping that regular inspection on the garden and making sure they are looking after it. And the tenants that say, I love my garden, I do it all the time. If they're not doing their garden all the time, then you can offer to get a gardener in, and obviously they have to pay for that, or they just get on with it and do it, but they need to manage it. And that, if you get a good tenancy agreement, it'll all be in there that the garden is part of it. So just don't let it get to a state, because if it gets bad, it's going to cost you a lot more to get back. So in sometimes it's worth just, I had one tenant and we just sent a cheap person in just to cut this, just to get the hedges down and everything, because they became unmanageable. And then the landlord paid for that, because it was just worth it, because otherwise it would have just got into a mess. But we told the tenants that they had to do it from then on and make sure that it was kept under control. So sometimes it's damage limitations, I think. Lastly, is this, what have I got here? Question about pets. Is there a way to clean the property at the end of the tenancy? Yeah, Julie's asking about cleaning a property. Yes, you can actually. In the old days, you could put in that people had to have a pet treatment at the end of a tenancy. you can put it in there now, but it's not enforceable because we're not allowed to charge tenant any fees. So if you get a good carpet cleaner in, a proper carpet cleaner, not just someone that does these, you know, a house for £95, if you get a, you know, somebody who is a reputable carpet, they will have stuff that they can put into the mix that will actually treat the carpets. And often we'll say that we will get the carpets cleaned and we will stop the money out of a deposit if I think people aren't going to clean them properly. Because the last thing you want them to do is get a rug doctor thing in that won't actually deal with the carpet and probably make them smell more. So sometimes it's easier to agree a cost for carpet cleaning and get it done once they've gone. But that's a personal thing. But yeah, if you get a proper carpet company in, a carpet cleaning company, they can put stuff into there that will treat the carpets and get anything out, which is really good. Jodie's put, one of our tenants signed a year contract through a letting agent. The letting agent has let us down so many times and are not giving the service they said they would. I've asked to cancel my contract and they're not fulfilling their side. They say that I can't and COVID is preventing the service. Since September, the tenants have dealt directly with me for issues. If I cannot cancel my contract with the letting agent now, can I cancel it after the year and keep the tenants as they are? Great. That's just, this is an example of bad letting agents, isn't it, really? Yeah, I can't see why they won't cancel. You can't not cancel a contract because of COVID, and that's just ridiculous. That's not a reason to not cancel a contract. Just give them notice. If you're on side with the tenant anyway, what I would do, I mean, I'm a letting agent, I don't advise this, but I would get a new agreement in with the tenants because that will supersede anything that is in currently with the letting agent. Make sure that the tenants are dealing with you so that you've totally got control of your own. They are your tenants because if you're whoever's property it is, they're your tenants. So speak to the tenants, tell them what you're doing, serve notice on the letting agent. So you'll need to check your terms and check what that is. It's sometimes ours is 3 months notice, but to be quite honest, I said if a relationship's broken down, I'll just let them go because why would I want to carry on working with them? So yeah, so basically serve notice, give them the right amount of notice, and yeah, you can keep the tenants unless there's something, there may be something in there, but again, is it an unfair clause? Some of the big agents, the big expensive agents might have something in it, you've got to pay X to get out of your contract. So look at your contract. I would, if you're a member of the NRLA, they would be able to advise you on that. That'll give you, usually legal advice on there. But yeah, just make sure, just serve notice on them, because if you've got the only thing that can cause a problem is you haven't got control of your tenants, then obviously the letting agent has. But if you've got that relationship with your tenants, then you can just, go over the top and just put another agreement in and then worry about the thing with the letting agent afterwards. You may have to pay them 3 months management fees or something, but if it gets them off the case, then it's probably worth it. And if they've given a bad service and you can prove that, you could always then threaten to go to, to take it to the ombudsman or something. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, again, if you want to DM me or something, then I can help with that one. But yeah, look at your contract is the thing to do, the management contract with your agent. The last thing is HMOs. I mean, as Sarah said, I'm not a real HMO expert, but I do know about HMOs because I've got a lot of colleagues that do manage them. And someone asked about tenanting HMOs. My views on tenanting HMOs is, from people that own them, is to think of it as a community. So you're trying to get people that fit in that HMO. It's not worth just taking someone that's going to wind the other neighbours up, or the other housemates up. So it's actually looking at having those, building a community within there. So sometimes I think recommendations from tenants is a really good thing to do. So tenants recommending others, and you can always not incentivize, but you could incentivize them for that. But have you got any friends that we've got a room? Anyone know of anyone that's been moving in? Choosing the right people at the start is key. What have I put here? Yeah, running a tight ship. So it's about making sure that if you want your HMO to be better than the one down the road, so they choose yours. It's making sure you are keeping it clean, you're doing all the right things, you're doing all inspections, you're looking after your tenants, you've got the right Wi-Fi. Getting all the right stuff in will help you get your HMOs tenanted and make sure they look really, that they are nice, that they're clean, and that people want to live there and that they're a nice place to live. I mean, I've seen some, obviously we're looking at stuff to buy, and some of them I wouldn't, oh, it's awful. I saw this one and there was these loads of, well, I don't know, they were obviously not working, these people, and they were just living in, it was almost squalor, it was awful. So, you know, and the only people that would live in those sorts of places would be desperate because they probably charged them very little rent or took their housing benefit off them. And it was just really awful. So it's making sure yours is the best place to live, I think. And that would be my advice on it. How do you ensure the high rent collection? So making sure you're collecting your rents all the time. It's the same as being in a normal property. Be on top of your rents. With tenants, if their rent isn't in on the day it's due, send them a text. Oh, your rent's not in. Have you checked with, can you check with the bank and see when it'll be in? So they know that you're looking on the right day it's due. If it's not there, then you're looking for it. So if you leave it for a week, I've had people phone me, it's people that manage their own, and oh, my tenant hasn't paid their rent. Oh, how late is it? 3 weeks. Oh, what have they said? Oh, I haven't spoken to them. Well, they think they've got away with it, haven't they? If it's 3 weeks on, they've got away with not paying rent for 3 weeks. So as soon as there's a way of doing it, you know, I am being, where's your rent? But I'm not, the way I'm saying it is, oh, notice your rent's not in, is, you know, can you check with your bank and let me know when it will be in? If I don't get an answer to that, then I'll ring them the next day and say, oh, you know, did you get my text? Your rent's not in, you know, but don't let it go. You don't have to do it in a nasty way because you can't obviously be seen to be hounding them, but you need to understand what the problem is. And it's very important early on to get that done. If they pay their rent late from the first month, it's unlikely that it's ever going to get back on track. So you need to scotch that from day one and make sure they know that you're on their case. So, and I think that's really important. And don't be afraid to ask the question, you know. But I always sort of try and blame it on the, you know, sort of suggest it might be the bank. Oh, it's not in. It's a problem with the bank, because then you're not actually accusing them, but hopefully then they'll answer. But yeah, I will hound. As an agent, we have to try and find out where people's rent are. So we have to keep on and on and on. And a landlord should do the same. You just need to be on top of it. And if they can't pay, oh, I haven't got enough, we'll pay the 300. You know, you rent 600. How much have you got? 300. We'll pay 300. Just get them to pay something. You know, it'll be much better than, and then we can take the other 300 at the end of the month or something. But just have that dialogue with them and build that relationship and make sure you're on their case. And that's, I think, the way you'd get, especially in HMOs, because you just need to make sure you've got everyone's rent coming in. And obviously it will be a warning sign if somebody doesn't suddenly stop paying their rent and they have before. And sometimes people are just proud, they don't like, they're embarrassed, so they don't really know, you know, they don't want to sort of phone you and say, oh, I haven't got the money this month or something. But it's about just working with them. And my tenants, even if they phone and say, because some of them are, you know, we haven't been paid yet, our rent will be in a week, that's fine, you know, thanks for ringing me, let me know. But in a week's time, if that rent's not in, it's back on the phone to them saying, oh, you said it was coming in today, it's not here. So it's just be on top of them, really, and making sure that you are there. Systems, someone asked about systems for lettings. I use a thing called Agent iOS, which is a system that we got years ago. We've used the same one. I wouldn't say I wouldn't recommend it. It's fine, I use it, but I don't know if it's the best one to use. It certainly works for us. But things like, I know that, I don't know if people have heard of Rick Gammon, but he's got a big portfolio of HMOs, and his system is Go Tenant, and he set that up, and that's very specific for HMOs. And my understanding of that is tenants can report online with that, they can do everything. So that might be one that's worth looking at. I don't know if anyone's got that one, but it seemed to me like it sounds as though it's geared up more for landlords with HMOs, which would work. But really, if you've only got a few properties, you can manage it. I used to manage it initially on a spreadsheet, on an Excel spreadsheet, but just make sure you've got everything and make sure your emailing is really tight. So because anything they say, anything a tenant says, or even a landlord says, if you're managing it, you need that evidence to make sure that you've got that in case it all comes back to bite you. So just make sure you're keeping records of everything, and you're keeping notes against each tenancy, because that might come back. That's something you need to put through. Last one, what have I got? Oh, additional compliance I think this one was because they were thinking of taking them off the agent. So do you need any additional compliance? Well, no, you just need the same stuff that the agent's doing, really. So that would be, this is in an HMO, so you'd need to make sure your fire safety is up to standard. You'd need to check check your fire alarms, make sure you're keeping up with rules and regs. And the NRLA again, and as we don't get paid to them, but you will get regular updates from them, so you will be able to keep up with all the latest stuff. And that is one of the big things, is trying to keep up and make sure you're on track, because it's like with the new electrical regulations at the moment. They come in on the 1st of April. Most of my landlords that manage their own properties, they didn't have a clue. They didn't know about it. So if I hadn't have emailed them and said, oh, did you know you've got to do this? This is the ones that self-manage. They wouldn't have known. So they could have missed that. And there's a £30,000 fine, I think, if you haven't got your electrical regs in. So it's about making sure you are keeping yourself updated by being a member and just reading the trade press, and keeping up with the latest legislation. And you would need, if you're collecting money on somewhere else, on behalf of someone else, you will need client money protection. I don't think you can get around that. I don't know if on a rent to rent you can do it, but certainly you will need client money protection if you're standing as an agent. And they are checking. I've had recently the property ombudsman checking my website that I haven't got my latest client money protection certificate on there, because they're all sitting at home. They're probably all able to do all this stuff now. And I just renewed my client money protection and I didn't put the certificate on my site. And they phoned up a week after it was due and said, your new certificate's not on your site. So just be aware, they are trying to, they're there trying to pick up on things and really trying to catch people out, I would say. Oh, there's Rachel says they've got Go Tenant for HMOs. So yeah, I mean, hopefully she thinks it's good. Do you think it's good? Yeah, I think I've heard it's really good. So I don't know if it's expensive, but I know Rick knows his stuff, and he's built it up to support his own business. So, and that's the letting software we've got was built by a letting agent for their letting agency, and then they sold it out. And I think that's the thing. If what you don't want to do is buy an off the package thing that doesn't really work. It needs to be someone that's actually in the industry and spin it out. And I don't get anything for advertising Rick stuff, but again, I thought, oh, if I was doing it now, I'd probably go and look at that one and see if that was worth doing. So what's this? I'm trying out lenders for buy-to-let property management. What does that mean? Sorry, Derek, I don't really understand that. I'm trying out lenders for property management. Tracy's put, you do not need it for rent to rent, but you do need it for lettings. Yeah, so that'd be your client money protection. Yeah, because rent to rent, you're working in a different way, aren't you? Landlord IO. I don't know what that means. Sorry, Dad, I still don't know what it means. Claire's put, do you need client money protection certificate for a bond held with the TDS? No, because you will have a certificate from the TDS. The TDS is another, is a different scheme. So it's a different deposit scheme. And if you put your money into one of the custodial schemes, which is your My Deposits, TDS, then basically you retain the money, but they give you a certificate. So when you protect it, you will get a certificate from them to show that money is protected, because you've paid for like an insurance fee for it. So it depends though. TDS do run the other scheme, which you don't pay for. So it depends which one it is. So, but yeah, anyone that you can either hold your deposit or you can pay and have it put in and you can either keep hold of your deposit, you pay an insurance fee, and then that covers the deposit and you give a copy to the tenant, or you pay it to one of the schemes where you don't even touch it. So that's the different ways of holding deposits. So as long as you do it, you just need to make sure that you do it, because otherwise it's 3 times the fine for the deposit, and you don't have a leg to stand on. You go to court, you have a protected deposit, in an eviction or anything, you don't have a leg to stand on. So I think that's certainly covered off everything I've got. I'm still trying to think of Dan's, what's the most ridiculous request? We have had some funny ones, and it just really annoys me now. I can't think of it. It's a property portfolio management software. Oh, sorry, Derek. Yeah, so Derek's just saying he's trying out a new property portfolio management software for buy-to-let called Landlord IO. So it's probably worth feeding that back into the group, what you think of it, because if people are looking for software, it's always good to know what other people have got. I mean, the software we've got is really for a biggish letting agency. It's got sales and lettings in it, so it's not something I would it's fairly expensive, so it's not something I would sort of recommend unless anyone's setting up a letting agency. So but yeah, try the other ones. Yeah, I think I've rambled on enough. Does anyone have any questions that I haven't covered, or anything that I've not covered very well, or I sort of feel I've just gone downline. I can talk for England, so I'm sorry about that. It was just trying to, I thought if I covered those off, I don't know if I've gone it. I was going to go through the basics of lettings, but then I thought, well, it's often better. A lot of this covered off all of that sort of stuff. So hopefully, oh, good. People think it's useful. So I did think, I was a bit because I always, when I go to networking things and people say, what do you do? And I think I'm a letting agent. And you can see them go, and their face goes over and you think, it's not very exciting, is it? So when Sarah said, can you do things on lettings? I thought, oh gosh, it's going to be really uninspiring, unexciting. It is like that. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of regs in it and there's a lot of stuff. And you just need, I think the key thing to take out of it is, if you get that relationship right with your tenants, and if you're managing it as well, you can't go wrong. You get the right tenant at the start, you do all the right stuff when you move them in. You know, if you use an agent or if you do it yourself and you respect everyone, if they're, the tenants are people, they're, some of them, yes, I do get really cross with some of mine and I do go off on one. But at the end of the day, some of them are lovely and most of them are lovely. And when my landlords start saying things about them, they'll say, oh, the tenants, and no, they're actually really nice people. And I think that's the key thing, is build that relationship, because at the end of the day, if they don't pay their rent, you won't get your money, you won't get paid. So you need to make sure that everyone works together. And, and I think it's just about people, in it, and communicating and treating people as you would treat, you treated yourself. But just make sure you do everything right at the start. Get the right people in and get all the stuff out to them and issue everything you have to. And if you are thinking of doing it yourself, I see some of these things on the sites, on the forums, and they say, oh, I've just got a new, can anyone give me an AST? And you think, or, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I've advertised my property. I've got all these people. I don't know how to, and you think, you need to think about these things before you start, because if you've got someone in there, especially at the moment with 6 months, you've got to give them 6 months notice, and it's probably 12 months to court, that's 18 months without any rent. It's, it's really quite a serious thing. So just make sure, and, I'm here to help. I'm in the groups. If anyone wants any advice or help, I'm happy to, just DM me, and I'm happy to answer and give you my thoughts on it. Obviously, it will only be my thoughts, but the NRLA is definitely, if you need any advice, is the best thing to do. So pets, better in unfurnished than furnished. Yeah, probably. I mean, we don't really do many furnished properties around here. So, yeah, I think, you've got furnished properties and you've got dogs and cats sitting on them, that's not great. So, yeah, I think it would be not ideal to have them in furnished properties, really, because they're sitting all over the furniture. It wouldn't be good. Julie said she's listening, and Jackie said, thanks. So I think that's it, unless anyone's got any other questions. Thanks for coming, everyone. Hope it has been useful. And yeah, here if you need anything, so just get me on the group and I can answer. Is Emma still here?
I'm here, yes.
Oh, yeah. All right.
I've learned loads today.
I just went down so yeah,
absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I know Sarah's not, her Wi-Fi and that is not great, so on her behalf, thank you very much. That was super helpful, and I'm sure everyone's got smiles on their faces. It's been an amazing session, so useful. Guys, those of you that are on, the recording will probably be put in the group once Sarah's back, because her Wi-Fi and everything for uploading, I think it would take longer. I think it would still be trying to upload by the time she's trying to check out, so next week from what I understand. But no, thank you, Karen, it's been brilliant. So yeah, thank you so much. A virtual round of applause for you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, cheers. Bye. Thanks.